I confronted Pat about her daughter's thievery, stole a wedding dress back, and left her with an oversized, outdated gown. I have known Pat for decades. As far back as I can recall, she was obsessed with the idea of having 5 children and living the idealized suburban life. During college, I gradually distanced myself from her due to her opportunistic nature and my lack of trust in her. She exhibits manipulative and domineering traits, and her notion of what is adorable does not appeal to me. Pat tends to walk in a very exaggerated manner when she wants to gain sympathy, typically when she wishes to portray herself as the underdog. It is astonishing to witness someone behave in such a contemptible and ludicrous manner simultaneously. I moved on with my life and successfully eliminated her from my social circle for years. However, Pat eventually located me on Facebook, and I begrudgingly accepted her friend request out of mere courtesy. Pat has become the embodiment of a permissive mother. Her 5 children have free reign, and she never holds them accountable for their actions. She attempted to orchestrate a close relationship between me and her daughters, insisting they refer to me as Auntie. Additionally, she tried to drop them off at my house without invitation. Her phone calls became increasingly demanding, monopolizing my time, and she even started showing up at my workplace. I set some boundaries, but she sought to exploit any loopholes, turning my experience into a living nightmare. My husband and I hosted a gathering for new members of the community center, not the real name. The community center is a very informal initiative predominantly focused on aiding the homeless population. We prefer helping strangers rather than catering to possibly self-absorbed acquaintances. While we are open to providing assistance, we have encountered genuinely dishonest individuals pretending to need help. Included in our services is a role held by one member who helps women secure free wedding and prom dresses. The community center's official location is actually a farm owned by an elderly couple, which features a barn, a venue, and a picturesque green field with an artificial lake and some birds. Although they charge for the use of their facilities, for events like weddings, there is no fee for community-centered activities. Pat had always harbored resentment towards her husband for insisting she return to work after their 3rd child while he juggled 3 jobs. She pressured him to get her pregnant again to realize her dream of having 5 children. He did not consent because, at nearly 45 years old, he feared he would never be able to retire. Nonetheless, she continued to have new babies regardless. Her fascination with pregnancy stems from the attention she receives during that time. In fact, she endured at least 1 miscarriage after each child. Pat became overly attached to our group, never missing any of our activities. I dreaded having her in my home, but it was an open invitation for nearly everyone, and she was quite active in organizing events. Her children's behavior was off-putting. Although we have a designated area for parties and entertainment, her kids ended up inside my bedroom. We were compelled to keep an eye on them and enjoyed none of our own celebration. Days later, I called her to express my concerns about her children's behavior, but she cut me off completely, diverting the conversation back to herself. She expressed that her children wanted to visit again and utilize our pool, which I chose to ignore. I didn't feel comfortable telling her, "No, I will not have your unruly children over." As summer approached, Pat called me specifically to inform me that her middle daughter was bored and wished to spend an entire week at our home. I politely declined, explaining that my husband and I work and cannot entertain guests. Pat disregarded my response. Her daughter then called me on the weekend, addressing me as Auntie, and attempted to persuade me by stating, "Mom says you invited me to spend summer with you." I quickly clarified the misunderstanding and tried to provide a gentle explanation to avoid hurting a child's feelings. Nonetheless, her daughter simply hung up. Pat's Facebook posts also raised some concerns. There were various vague rants along with comments from friends expressing frustration over her, asking someone to watch her kids for a couple of hours only to leave them the entire day. Another friend criticized her for wanting to go out for a girls' night, while simultaneously requesting her friends to be patient about repaying money she owed them, yet she appeared to have funds for her Friday night outings. I viewed these public discussions of private issues as a cry for help regarding her frustrations. Then, unpleasant events started occurring. For instance, there was the time she volunteered to wrap Christmas presents for underprivileged children. We sought to create a mix of less expensive gifts alongside more luxurious ones. Oddly, some exquisite and attractive toys and games seemingly vanished, only to later appear under her Christmas tree, evidence provided through her mother-in-law's Facebook posts. Nobody could prove anything, but it was infuriating. Additionally, my daughter called me in tears after attending Pat's daughter Casey's birthday party. She felt neglected the entire night because she had not gifted the expensive gaming equipment Casey had all but insisted upon. My daughter had requested it, but I said no. We would purchase her a thoughtful and delightful gift appropriate to her interests. So when I arrived to pick her up, my daughter was sitting alone in the living room while Casey and her friends remained outside. Stories about Pat and her family continued to circulate. The owners of the farm, the community center, decided to lock their gates unless they had guests or events due to Pat's habit of driving in whenever she wanted, which usually resulted in her children screaming and disrupting ongoing weddings, throwing stones at the koi in the lake, or harassing the geese in the yard. There were also instances when she stiffed another soccer mom by skipping out on the lunch bill and then played the financially struggling card. Other parents began to resent her because she fostered unnecessary animosity. When my daughter turned 13, I finally permitted her to wear my grandmother's ring. Although it is not valuable, it is vintage, and girls today often seek that bohemian look. My grandmother had given it to me when I reached adolescence, so I passed it down to my daughter for her birthday celebrations. It was peculiar that she became quiet and distracted thereafter. She also expressed a reluctance to go to school, which made my husband and me suspicious. She never confided in us, and our other children were oblivious. We contacted her school, but her teachers assured us that nothing had changed in her environment. My husband and I were concerned she might be experiencing bullying, but our daughter provided no clues to help us. She is typically upbeat and compassionate, never having faced issues with her peers. I reached out to her best friend's mother. Natalie, my daughter's best friend, disclosed what was occurring. Casey, Pat's oldest child, and my daughter had formed a close bond. I was already aware and not overly pleased. The age difference, Casey was 17, wasn't particularly inappropriate, but I preferred my daughter associate with peers of a similar age. Casey is strikingly beautiful and academically gifted, yet she possesses a significant amount of vanity. To summarize, she asked my daughter to try on the ring, subsequently refusing to return it. Eventually, she claimed she had lost it but would search for it, so my daughter was heartbroken. My daughter persisted in asking for her ring back, prompting Casey to ostracize her and spread rumors that my child was attempting to steal her ring. Some students at school sided with Casey, resulting in her wearing my daughter's jewelry as if nothing had happened. If that doesn't constitute taunting, I am uncertain what does. I feel guilty for not being able to encourage my daughter to be open with me and to feel safe in sharing the truth. When I attempted to talk to her, she burst into tears. I felt both the pain of a mother and outrage at a teenage bully acting with such disregard under our very noses. I confronted Pat's car immediately after school. As Casey was about to enter the vehicle, I requested to speak with her. I took hold of Casey's hand and asked to see her jewelry. Casey froze and attempted to clench her fist, prompting me to be resolute. Casey yelled, "Mom," and Pat struggled to exit the car. I managed to slide the ring off. Casey has tiny hands and had placed it on her index finger. Initially, Pat yelled at me. However, after I pointed out the engraving on the band, my grandmother's maiden name, she claimed it had been loaned to her daughter by my child. Then she insisted she purchased it. I did not entertain her claims. I warned them that I was aware Casey had been an abusive friend to my daughter. Later, Pat called to reprimand me. She claimed she was striving to raise an assertive young woman and that I had undermined this effort by being overbearing. She never apologized for her thieving daughter. Pat's husband, Hank, has become somewhat of a pushover. Pat has worn him down to the point where he feels compelled to obey her to maintain harmony. She behaves like a bully who withdraws affection whenever he fails to comply with her wishes, even in public situations. As a result, she had children number 4 and 5 after an ongoing campaign that involved leaving him for 2 months. Her pregnancies were a burden, as she demanded to be treated as if she were the only woman who has ever been pregnant. Upon becoming pregnant, she would often be seen in a wheelchair and would fall ill on weekends, necessitating her children being sent to friends and family so she could rest. Pat systematically bullied Hank. She would depart with their children, leaving him behind. Poor Hank frequently appeared distraught, often drinking on his porch or simply looking exceedingly lonely. This pattern allowed her to evade professional obligations. Hank barely had a voice, thus he struggled to maintain the marriage. Although everyone adored him, they equally despised her. Hank thrived on interacting with others, but appeared apprehensive about upsetting Pat. Over time, as my husband noted, Hank exhibited signs of depression and mental distress. Our friend Lena oversees the wedding and prom dress initiative. It is uncomplicated. Dresses are obtained through donations, eBay, trunk shows, and other means. Particularly beautiful dresses are set aside to allow more than one bride to wear them. In some cases, a bride might pay $50, but typically, the dresses are given as gifts. Pat became involved in this initiative. Lena kept her included since there were no past issues, and her responsibilities were primarily limited to shipping the dresses. Pat chose to renew her vows, and her diva-like behavior truly reached its peak. For starters, she pressured another couple to relinquish their wedding date at the farm because she needed her renewal date to coincide with her original wedding date. This couple was understandably displeased by her harassment and opted for another venue. Consequently, the farm owners were annoyed since Pat had already cost them revenue after negotiating a reduced rate, claiming she couldn't afford it but would repay them by performing maintenance work at the venue, which she never fulfilled. Pat became fixated on a specific dress already assigned to another bride. Lena made it clear that Pat would need to purchase her gown. Instead, Pat remained composed and sent back the incorrect dress. She steadfastly insisted it was the correct piece, despite all of Lena's notes. The other bride was gracious about the situation, visibly disappointed but never causing a scene. What upset me the most was that I had chosen that dress and purchased it for $40 at a garage sale, using Lena's funds. It was a vintage piece, ankle-length, white, adorned with lace, and a tremendous find. When confronted, Pat adopted an attitude similar to Casey's and employed the "this is mine" strategy. We sympathized with the other bride, doing our utmost to find her something nice to wear. This bride had demonstrated resilience, pulling herself out of welfare, obtaining her high school diploma, and striving for a certificate as an acrylic nail technician. So, was her reward to have someone like Pat steal her dress? Pat never acknowledged her wrongdoing, but her insistence on claiming it as her spoke volumes. Lena refused to allow Pat back into her warehouse. Their last phone argument culminated in Pat referencing the other bride's past as though it mattered, and asserting, "This conversation is over, this is my dress, and you are incorrect." That occurred weeks before the other bride's wedding. Pat went all out on her wedding decorations, overspending significantly. She hired a caterer, but, in her wedding invitation, requested specific dishes for her Sunday brunch wedding. Whether she ran out of banquet money or was just in full moocher mode is uncertain. I can only envision her overly animated antics as she practically begged everyone to contribute food to her wedding reception. There is nothing inherently wrong with potluck weddings. They can even add a cozy touch to a family-centric celebration. However, isn't it essential to have some intimacy with your guests to request such contributions? Even I received an invitation. I informed everyone that I wouldn't be attending because I felt uncomfortable being dictated what to bring alongside expectations of gifting cash. Several older ladies in our circle concurred. Some opted not to decline in advance, fearful of confronting Pat due to her bullying tendencies. Lena reached out to me the eve of Pat's vow renewal. Lena was there to close Saturday night bingo, and Pat was excessively amiable, a typical behavior for her whenever events are in her favor. Lena glanced into the garment bag and noticed the exact dress, while Pat was occupied supervising the wedding decorations. The issue with individuals like Pat is their expectation that everyone will comply or facilitate their desires. More often than not, they underestimate those around them and assume we are all naive. Lena has a candid demeanor, unafraid to say, "Sue me." She told me she would just ruin the dress. After all, it was indeed hers, giving her the right to do whatever she wanted. Should Pat opt for legal recourse, she would need to establish ownership. However, the dress itself bore the same marks along the hem, and the tags displayed identical numbering utilized for logistical identification. Pat had the dress altered, complete with extra beading and dyed a deep cream hue. Yet, it was clearly the same item. Lena and I ventured in before the venue closed for the night. All brides are allowed to stay in a small bedroom for a minimal fee, eliminating the need to commute on their wedding day. The makeshift chapel was stunning. I have no idea how she financed it, but it was adorned with flowers and extravagant details. Naively, I thought to bring ink to spill on the dress, but Lena insisted on something far worse, like a real surprise. Ink would be too obvious, and if Pat noticed it beforehand, she might manage to acquire another gown. No, the ideal plan was to gain Pat's trust that everything was fine with her dress. Therefore, Lena locked herself in a bathroom stall and completely cut out the back panel. She patiently replaced it on its hanger and zipped the bag. We exited through the emergency door with the dresses back sewn into Lena's purse. I have a strong disdain for those who target and steal from others they perceive to be in a weaker position. Scheduled for 9 a.m., Pat called me at 7 a.m., but I ignored her calls. I finally answered at 8 a.m., feeling both curious and concerned about whether she suspected anything. Pat was in a panic, crying about how her dress was missing a portion. I intentionally made her explain the situation, behaving annoyingly dense and continually interrupting her while stalling the conversation. She tried to borrow my wedding dress. I declined politely. Then she asked for my assistance in locating a dress. I enjoyed reminding her that the local bridal shops were closed on Sundays, and those that would open were nearly an hour away. The farm was already around an hour's distance from our town. If Pat found a shop willing to rent her a dress, she would need to try it on and have it steamed. Even if a dress were ready to wear, it would easily consume over 2 hours round trip. She attempted to solicit my help in picking a dress, who would cover this expense. Even if she managed to acquire something, it would undoubtedly increase her costs. Moreover, these shops typically open at 10 or 9:30 at the earliest. By the time she secured her dress, it would be nearly time to conclude the wedding, as she needed to vacate the venue by noon for the next event. She broke down, mumbling some nonsensical phrases I couldn't comprehend. Consequently, Pat hung up and sought assistance from Lena instead, requesting her to bring anything available. Lena and I ended up delivering the most outdated, musty-smelling, oversized dresses. Pat's reaction was a mix of anger and frustration. She even attempted to wear her knee-length silk bridal slip as a wedding dress, but it appeared utterly inappropriate and genuinely cheap. Pat attempted to persuade her daughter to lend her dress, which had a back zipper that was not functioning properly, but Casey ultimately refused, questioning whether her mother expected her to attend the wedding in a state of undress. The inadequate dress required a petticoat to enhance the skirt, which was unavailable. Consequently, it dragged along the floor, forcing Pat to continuously pull it up. As she walked down the aisle, one hand grasped her bouquet while the other gripped the dress. The gown appeared limp and awkward, accentuated by the visibly arranged pins that caused the sleeves and neckline to pucker unattractively. Throughout the ceremony, she exuded discomfort and seemed out of place. Attendance was sparse, but this was not kicked off by any desire for revenge. It was simply a reflection of how others responded to her entitled demeanor. The dress was an eyesore. The wedding reception was adorned with elegant decorations, a beautiful cake, and a bridezilla adorned in a disaster of a dress. I chose not to stay, but I heard she was so disheartened that she spent the entire day sulking. There were no dances, no speeches. Eventually, she had to change into a shirt and leggings because the gown was too constricting. Reports circulated that she donned flip-flops and wandered around aimlessly, ordering the ushers to begin folding chairs within 1 hour of starting the reception. In other words, she practically rushed everyone to leave without even cutting the cake. Since that day, Pat's demeanor changed noticeably. She became much quieter and started to avoid everyone. I suspect she was disillusioned that no one came to her aid, not even her family visiting from out of town. Her husband, Hank, finally broke under the immense pressure and sought assistance. He endured long hours at work, only to return home to clean the house while Pat used their children as an excuse to overspend. Hank also ended up taking on homework duties because Pat never devoted time or showed patience. Therapy appeared to have a positive impact on Hank, as the last time Pat left with their children, he seemed less troubled. He started riding his bicycle and appeared more relaxed while mowing the lawn. Hank confided in my husband that he had contemplated suicide after their third child. Upon Pat's return, he maintained the routine but expressed interest in doing things for himself. Gradually, Pat was seen alone more frequently. Hank became less visible when he shared the car, eventually moving in with his parents. He filed for divorce on the grounds of emotional distress, though I don't believe he won. Rather, a settlement or agreement appears to have been reached to limit her contact with him unless it pertained solely to their children. Additionally, I am uncertain if Pat ever genuinely suspected who was responsible for her dress's misfortune. She slowly distanced herself from the community center and reduced her participation in social events. Pat also unfriended me on Facebook, along with nearly everyone connected to the school and center. Edit to summarize briefly, the bride who was difficult stole a wedding gown from an underprivileged woman. The genuine dress owner ultimately ruins her special day. Edit regarding my daughter, no prior incidents occurred. Pat, her family, and my family were never friends. While I frequently crossed paths with her, following the incident at Casey's birthday, no further occurrences arose until the ring incident. Afterward, Casey played the "OP treated me poorly" card because I physically removed the ring from her fingers. However, I genuinely do not feel compelled to protect her feelings. Edit thank you to everyone who took the time to read this. I appreciate the thoughtful and kind responses, as well as the critical remarks. I recognize we all have different perspectives, and some situations may evoke strong emotions, leading us to instinctively react by thinking about how things should have unfolded instead. I value your insights. Even the scornful comments indicate a sense of injustice, which is a positive sign. Nobody has praised Pat's actions, reflecting our shared pursuit of fairness and balance. Comments, even those laced with sarcasm, affirm that this situation has resonated with you, and I strive to remain non-judgmental. I am equally grateful for the supportive Redditors who have exhibited kindness. For an accurate visual representation, these links may give you a sense of what was involved. While they are not the actual dresses, they are extremely similar. What she envisioned wearing down the aisle, shorter sleeve, no train, ankle length. https www.amaprom.com products see-through scoop beach, lace wedding dresses, long sleeve romantic boho wedding dress bridal gowns, Amy 3003. https www.amaprom.com products see-through scoop beach, lace wedding dresses, long sleeve romantic boho wedding dress bridal gowns, Amy 3003. What? The dress was, in fact, even larger. https www.etsy.com listing 294,506,251. Etsy wedding romantic lace wedding dress UTM source equals Pinterest and UTM medium equals page tools and UTM campaign equals share and UTM term equals SOLPD2 V1 and share time equals 1,530,404. Story 2. I feared for my safety when the chief of police threatened me at work. Months later, he was arrested for DUI and much worse. I have held numerous part-time positions over the years to assist with the finances. Some were located in larger cities, while others were in smaller towns. This particular narrative unfolds in a major urban area where each district resembles a small community. The city essentially consists of many small towns that expanded until they merged. This job occurred nearly 2 decades ago, so the conversations are based on memory. One of my part-time roles involved working evenings and weekends at a liquor store that featured a drive-through for beer, soda, and wine. We were permitted to sell only beer and wine through the drive-through. If a patron wished to purchase liquor or more than a specific quantity of wine, they were required to park and enter the store. Additionally, we could not deliver liquor to their vehicle. The state enforced numerous detailed regulations like that, and I had just completed the obligatory training for selling alcohol, so the rules were still fresh in my mind. The store had operated for decades, and the manager was the owner's lackadaisical son. He was willing to bend or outright disregard laws pertaining to alcohol sales if it meant increasing his profits. He dismissed any consequences as the responsibility of the employee handling the transaction. This didn't affect him directly, so he disregarded such matters. The manager had various privileged customers who were expected to be treated differently, even if it meant violating regulations. I believe the penalty for selling liquor through the drive-thru was greater than the store's total earnings in a year. I adhered strictly to the rules, so if the manager intended to break or bend them, he would have to do so on his own. It wasn't like we received any benefit for violating rules for the manager's favored clients. He struggled to find staff because of his reputation, and few desired to work for him. Therefore, refusing to accommodate the manager's preferred clients certainly would not result in my termination. No one informed me that we had an unusual customer who appeared several afternoons each week and twice on weekends. This customer was atrocious. He was rude, had an unpleasant odor, and exhibited extreme prejudice and sexism. He made inappropriate jokes to the female employees and insisted that we find a park with him, as if we were prostitutes. He was not just any officer but the chief of police from a nearby area. Most of the small towns within the larger city had their own police departments and fire services. The first time I encountered him, Sisai, a coworker and the manager's niece, who was a wonderful person, advised me to observe and remain silent. She sold him 2 cases of beer, and he departed. I noticed that the back seat of his vehicle was so cluttered that there was barely space to place my feet. She cautioned me to never speak negatively to him and to fulfill his requests, regardless of whether he remained in his car. She never disclosed the reason for this. A few weeks later, I found myself alone working on a Sunday around noon. Business was typically slow during that time. The chief drove into the drive-thru. Me, hello, how are you today? What can I get for you? Chief, I'm fine and so are you. I need a lot of items and they need to go in the trunk. Me, let me grab a pen and pad so you don't have to repeat yourself, just a moment. I retrieved them. What would you like? The chief listed various brands of beer, wine, liquor, mixers, and some candy. Me, is that everything? Am I authorized to sell this to you through the drive-thru, or do you need to come inside for the stronger beverages? The chief exited his vehicle, while it was parked in the drive-thru lane, and approached me closely, towering over me. Me, is that everything? Am I permitted to sell this to you through the drive-thru, or do you need to come inside for the stronger beverages? Chief, do you believe I would break the law? That I would ever embarrass myself, my city, or the Marines in this manner? I still have no idea what the Marines had to do with anything. Me, of course I don't believe that. I'm simply asking because the state training was unclear on this. I suppose it must be acceptable. After all, you are an officer of the law. Just assure me that if I make an error, it will remain between us. The training was not unclear, but I felt threatened by him and wanted to avoid an argument. Chief, it better be acceptable. Stop retreating. He was advancing toward me and very tall and intimidating, not in a positive way. I need to check if you are recording anything. Extend your arms from your body, parallel to your shoulders. Well, I see you are not wearing a wire or a bra. Perhaps I should loosen your shirt a bit and have some fun. I should take you back into that storeroom to enjoy myself. No one would ever know. Me, I am very sorry. I doubt my father would approve. I am only here on Sundays at this time because I attend Mass earlier. If I were single, I might be receptive to it. But that would mean breaking one of the 10 commandments. The chief had a rosary hanging from his rearview mirror and Catholic stickers on his official vehicle. It was a predominantly Catholic area of the city, so this wasn't unusual. I was terrified of him, desperately trying to say anything to keep him from approaching me. I truly believed he would take me into the storeroom and violate me. Chief, well, it could be worth it. Hurry up with my order and I will leave you alone this time. You ought to wear a supportive bra when you know I am coming by. I nodded, then hurried to gather his items and ring him up. At that moment, I simply wanted him to leave. I felt extremely fearful but was aware that we depended on the income. I needed to devise a strategy to avoid being near him again while still retaining my job. Sisai arrived to take over about 2 hours later. She immediately noticed that I was distressed and inquired about what had happened. Since there were no customers, I explained everything. The chief came in and wanted a ton of items, cases of beer, a great deal of wine, liquor, mixers, the whole works. He insisted on having it all through the drive-thru. I questioned whether it was permissible since the training hadn't clarified. He exited his vehicle and kept crowding me. Eventually, he commanded me to stop moving after pressing me against the wall. He claimed he had to pat me down to check if I was wearing a wire. It truly felt more like an unwanted advance. I was sobbing, and Sisai hugged me to help me calm down. She asked if that was everything that happened. He suggested he should open my shirt for fun, and that he ought to take me into the storeroom without anyone knowing. Sisai, this is why we give him whatever he requests and never question him. We do not want him to step out of the car because he has attempted this with everyone. He's unaware that we have cameras everywhere now. No sound, but cameras. I'm not sure what can be done, but I will think on it. I did not see Sisai for over a week due to our schedules. I felt anxious working alone in the store. I hadn't felt unsafe there until my encounter with the chief of police. I began considering how to address a chief of police. I conducted some research and learned that officers from other jurisdictions could pull him over and/or arrest him. Our neighborhood was promoting the summer festival season with numerous signs about drunk driving. Summer is when every local Catholic church holds a significant festival with games and rides, serving as the church's major fundraiser. Naturally, the church festival wouldn't be the same without ample beer, especially in this area. One day, I walked over to the police station. It wasn't far. I asked an officer if they would be inclined to pull over another officer if it was clear that he had been drinking. The officer, who was friendly, wanted more details, but he expressed interest in the situation. I work at the drive-through and liquor store. I have a customer whom I fear and who breaks several laws. He holds a high-ranking position in a different part of the city, not our neighborhood. I don't have any warrants or a criminal record. I am not attempting to accuse him to evade consequences. Good cop. Let's step inside and grab some coffee to discuss this. A couple of nights a week, at a certain time, and again during our slow periods on Saturdays and Sundays, a high-ranking officer drives through. He insists he can procure whatever he desires without needing to come inside for any reason. The first time he came through while I was alone, I asked him if he needed to come inside for the liquor and the amount of wine he requested. I was not rude or disrespectful. I even mentioned that I might not fully understand the training or the loopholes in the regulations. Good cop, are you aware that simply being a police officer does not exempt him from following the law? Yes, I understand, but that isn't all he did. When I challenged him, he stepped out of the car and backed me against the wall. He touched me, supposedly to check for a wire. Afterward, he suggested taking me into the back room for some so-called fun. I am genuinely afraid that he might sexually assault me. I can't think of a way to stop this except getting him arrested for all the drinking and driving he does. I am unwilling to file a complaint regarding the sexual assault. I cannot endure that. Good cop. What do you mean regarding all the drinking and driving? Does he do it frequently? He is consistently drinking whenever he drives through. Typically, he has a beer in his hand by the time he reaches me. I've witnessed him consume up to 3 beers if he has to wait for 1 or 2 other vehicles. He never orders fewer than a case of beer unless he also buys whiskey. I mentioned the whiskey he usually orders, although I can't recall its name now. The back seat of his vehicle is always filled with empty cans each time we encounter him. The beer he buys usually sits on the front seat beside him. He opens a can before he departs, stating he wants to ensure it is fresh. The only time he has us place all the beer in the trunk or back seat is if he also orders a soda. Then he orders whiskey and pours some soda out to allow space for the whiskey. Good cop. These are serious allegations against someone you claim is a high-ranking police officer. Are you certain you want to proceed with these claims? You may be subjected to scrutiny if this escalates to a court case or disciplinary action. Are you prepared for that? I am terrified that this man will rape me. I cannot endure that. I will testify about his drinking and driving endeavors. I won't make any statements regarding the sexual assault threats. I simply can't handle that, so I need to stop it before it occurs. Good cop. What are you concerned we will uncover if we investigate you? What secrets are you afraid we might discover? I am a mother in my 30s with 3 children. I lead a tame life. I have been happily married for more than 10 years. I have never faced legal trouble. I don't drink, do drugs, attend wild parties, or engage in those sorts of activities. I am not against social drinking, but I do not partake. I have some debt, but who doesn't? There is nothing I can think of that you could uncover. Do what you need to. Good cop. How can you substantiate what he does? You are not present in the car with him. How do you envision us being able to pull him over and arrest him? Me, he has a routine. He pulls in, drinks whatever beer he brings with him, orders what he wants, and frequently asks me to dispose of his recently emptied cans, 1-3 depending on how long the line is. I have no idea why he requests me to discard those cans. His back seat is often crammed with empties. We provide him with whatever he asks for because we do not wish for him to exit the vehicle. I am not the only employee he has insulted. Once he pays, he turns right out of the parking lot. Then he takes a left about a mile down the road. I know this because I traveled the same route a few times. His vehicle indicates he is from Somerview and identifies it as the chief's car. It even has his name emblazoned on it. I do not know how old the empty cans in his vehicle are, but I am able to set his beer cans aside if you need them for fingerprints or something similar. Good cop. He is the chief of Somerview. Wait here, I need to alert our chief. Do not leave. I anticipated they would have to involve higher-ranking officers. I didn't expect such excitement. About 30 minutes later, the chief of police from my neighborhood arrived. I recognized him because he is married to a cousin of mine, although I have never had much of a relationship with him. We exchanged greetings and the customary, "How is your family?" pleasantries for a moment or two. I had many relatives in the area, perhaps too many some days. Chief of police, I understand you have information about the chief. Why are you coming to us with this? Me. He intimidates me every time he comes through the drive-thru while consuming alcohol. I have kids and family in this community. He is going to harm someone. He has been inappropriate with every female employee at the store. I feel threatened that if I do not sell him whatever he desires, in whatever quantities, through the drive-thru, he will exit the vehicle and at least threaten to assault me. I want you to intervene regarding his drunk driving, so he won't have an opportunity to visit our drive-thru several times each week. Chief of police, if I investigate, will I uncover a personal connection between you two? Are there any factors that might discredit your testimony? Me. Of course not. I wouldn't associate with him willingly for any reason other than to maintain professionalism. Moreover, I am happily married. Chief of police, based on what you've described, this seems like a clear instance of drunk driving, particularly if we can catch him with a significant quantity of alcohol and empties in his possession. We will require an officer in the store to whom you can hand over the empty cans if we intend to use them as evidence. How comfortable would you feel with an officer present? Me. I would be okay with it as long as the officer stays out of sight and out of uniform. If you are looking for empties, Wednesday would work well. If you aim to catch him in his vehicle with a substantial amount of alcohol, he usually arrives on Sundays around noon or Saturdays around 2 to 3. I reviewed security footage to pinpoint when he typically comes by. You might need to speak with the manager afterward to obtain those recordings, or consult Sisai, as she really manages the operations. Why is everyone so excited about this? Chief of police, his behavior has drawn significant attention recently. I cannot disclose further details, but we have a strong interest in him. Additionally, I can't say I like him. He made advances towards my wife at a function we had to attend. I departed after writing and signing a statement. I did not receive any updates for several weeks, and my frustration grew. The chief continued to visit the store, still drinking while driving, and he persisted in making inappropriate remarks to me. One Sunday, approximately 2 months after I made my statement, the chief entered once more. He ordered even more than his typical Sunday amount. Less than a minute after leaving our parking lot, I heard sirens, a multitude of them. I hoped they were taking the chief into custody, but I couldn't be certain. The following morning, while dropping the kids off at school, all the mothers were abuzz with gossip. Apparently, the chief had been pulled over for driving while intoxicated. They discovered beer, wine, and hard liquor in his possession. Subsequently, they found drugs during the search of his home. They uncovered unregistered firearms and information about other illicit activities he was involved in, corruption, and even child pornography, among others. I spoke to the chief of police a week or two later. I would not need to testify. They had ample other witnesses willing to come forward. The chief had become a significant liability for those who had supported him in his area. Many of his close associates eventually provided testimony against him to protect themselves. The chief received a prison sentence. I am unsure of the specific location or duration. I just know it was a very troubling situation. The chief's wife also left him. The media extensively covered the entire ordeal. I remain grateful that my name was kept out of the spotlight.